Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's Alex Searle here and Sarah Schwab with the CultureOS podcast. And we've got a good one here today. Our next guest doesn't just talk about AI transformation. Carol Scott is Senior Director at Microsoft, leading AI adoption across a $5 billion EMEA portfolio. Previously, she led Microsoft's $7 billion cloud and AI business out of Silicon Valley. And this year, she launched the Dual Stack, which is a framework built on one core argument: AI capability and human capability have to be developed in parallel. So that's exactly the right kind of stuff for us to talk about today. Her keynote is called I Am the Agent, and it asks leaders to rethink their role as orchestrators of both human and digital workforces. As it happens, exactly what we've been wrestling with on our CultureOS journey. So, Carol, very happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Anything
Fantastic.
additional, Carol, that I think Alex did a nice job of capturing your amazing journey to date. Anything else that you'd like to introduce to our listeners?
Sure. Well, it certainly takes a team. So Microsoft is doing things that they've never done before, as many of the hyperscalers are. We're signing these record multi-$100 million to billion-dollar agreements. And so I like to tell my team, like, there is no playbook. We write the playbook. And it's certainly a team effort. So once these are signed, our teams and customer and partner success have to help deliver on these agreements over multiple years. So it's been very exciting because I often say it's not the technology, it's the psychology that holds people back because change is hard, especially with all of this. So that's why I'm super excited to talk today about culture, because I do feel like that culture piece is key to success. So thank you for having me.
And Alex, we had the pleasure, didn't we, of a good hour with Carol before this call. And I think, Carol, there were some things that you said on our prep call that we'd like to sort of dig in, and I think of particular interest to our listeners. And picking up this theme of team, one of the things you told us on the previous call was that the guidance you give to your team is fast, but not frenzied. Help unpack that for us a little bit more. What does that mean? Why did you come up with that that tagline, and what does it really mean as we sort of unpack that?
Yeah, so one of the things that has really challenged us with AI is there's a lot to learn. Now, yes, AI has been around for a long time, but AI as we know it today, Gen AI, I still remember the week, ChatGPT came out in December, end of December. And so it's really challenged us to have to work quickly, especially working at Microsoft, where we've been leading a lot of this growth in partnership with OpenAI and now all these different services. So we've had to learn as we go, and the expectations are higher, and we're signing these bigger agreements. And so we have to work quickly. Also, my team and other teams in our partner group with these big agreements, they're very sophisticated customers, as are a lot of the Fortune 100 or larger customers. So you have to work faster. The expectation is if something goes wrong or something is new, you can't wait days or weeks to fix it. So what I talk to my team about is really looking at that critical path instead of feeling overwhelmed. You don't have to know everyone. You just have to know the right person to go to, or how to triage, or how to do it, because it can feel overwhelming. I even feel that way sometimes, where I'm learning about AI as I'm applying AI and I'm speaking on it and I'm working with customers, to just step back and say, okay, how do I get from literally A to B? Yes, we have to do it differently, but there is the expectation of a culture of what I would call escalation, where we have to work quickly, but not feel overwhelmed by the pace of it all. The other thing too, just like anything, not just in technology, but when you look at culture, of looking for patterns. And so I'll just wrap up by saying, okay, we also talk about scale. So what we do on our team and in our larger group is to say, okay, say for example, we're feeling overwhelmed because we have all these escalations. We look for patterns and we say, okay, instead of reacting to each one, I see 3 patterns that equals 3 people. And these are the 3 people I go to versus trying to figure it out each time. And so it's just a mental model shift of how to work more quickly, but taking the time to step back to get that scale versus, I mean, my team manages, like you said, over 5.5 billion of, commitments, over 85 accounts, and so we just have to learn to work quickly, but not be overwhelmed.
And how do you hire for that capability? You need high performers, you need people who are committed to excellence, who can move at pace, and yet you're talking about a lot of ambiguity and no playbook. So when you're
Yes.
thinking about bringing new people onto your team, what do you look for?
That is a really great question. And especially like when I started at Microsoft, it was right before this new AI boom and hiring people. But even then, Microsoft, yes, we focus on the growth mindset, but we look for ambiguity. But I like to say I can deal with ambiguity, but I cannot deal with chaos. And so I'm okay if there is ambiguity, but we have to get aligned on like what our goals are, right? So we're super clear. Like there's an agreement, at the cloud, and AI is like electricity, like a utility. You sign an agreement, but if you don't use it, you don't, consume your commitment. And so what we try to do is look for people that can handle ambiguity, but they also have clarity on what the goals are and can stay focused. And the best advice I got when I got to Microsoft, because I can do a lot of different things, is to do fewer things and go deeper versus trying to do too many things. The other thing with hiring, because there are a lot of people, especially coming over here to EMEA, where people wanted to join the team. And they're really great in a traditional environment, but they're not, it really is step change on how you think. Like you have multiple accounts, you have a lot going on, you have to be really organized, but also, and this is not easy for a lot of people, you have to be willing to escalate quickly and to ask questions where a lot of times people feel like, oh, I need to know it or figure it out on my own, or I need to figure it out before I escalate. And so the leader that founded our big partner team, Katie Brown, always says, escalate early and often with specificity. And so at Microsoft, it's better to ask for help than later have someone say, why didn't you ask that? And that is so important in hiring, is to say, and it's not really about personality, because I have a lot of great introverts that can keep pace, but to understand the pace of the business. Can you handle, again, that ambiguity, but have structure and not be chaotic? And then having that growth mindset and also an eagerness to learn and be proactive. And so that's really what we're looking for. So, I'll just seed this a little bit. I have a liberal arts background. There are a lot of people at Microsoft. One of my good friends that's a top, technical seller at Microsoft has a English degree. So really here at Microsoft, it's really about the willingness and ability to learn and pivot and apply things quickly. You can learn the technology, but it's really that, keeping up with that pace, but not being chaotic.
Do you find that as you're kind of listing these skills and these capacities of, kind of the ideal people, the ideal team members, it kind of feels like those are the types of things that, perhaps some of the, forward-thinking businesses in the 80s and 90s would have also really been looking at, if we think of Dell, if we think of Microsoft also, in its first kind of, rise in the 80s and 90s, in personal computing, it was really, on the shoulders of smart, capable people who could deal with pressure. They could deal with ambiguity. Like you said, I love that you mentioned ambiguity. And so it seems like even though we're in unprecedented times, the same kind of qualities in the right human beings are a lot of sort of the same in a way. They may have changed, and those qualities may have changed in certain bandwidths, but it's still, critical thinking, a creativity, a curiosity, an ability to handle some pressure as well. Those things are still there. Do you think there's any nuance in the way that they've changed in our current moment now that we're in this part of history compared with maybe in the past where we were looking for similar capabilities in our people,
Right.
but somehow the circumstances were different?
Yeah, that's a great comment, because I always say that I have built my career on, curiosity, courage, and kindness, and also that kind of get it done. I'm the type of person that can take the idea and then kind of take it down the chute to get it done. I think what's changed, just like a lot of things, is the amount of data points and information that are coming in. So, how we went from having 24-hour cable TV, and then we went to having phones. And, a lot of times our nervous systems are not designed to know everything going on in the world at once. The thing that's changing now, and there is kind of a mental load that comes with it. Now with AI, we're learning AI. It's really making us challenge ourselves and think differently. I think the thing is, are you able to filter information to the right things with all of the things coming at you and still get work done? And, I'm always telling my team, you're going to get invited to a lot of things. You're going to have to learn a lot of things. Let's just remember the critical path. One is we have to deliver on our, to our customers. We have to deliver on our financial commitments. And so even with all those things going on, I think those that are most successful are able to see, okay, there's a lot coming in, but no, like I even myself have to know when to pivot away from, I have one screen with all my AI stuff and running on here, running my business, but then there are times I just really have to focus. And so I do think the biggest challenge a lot of people have is knowing what to prioritize and what to care about as things are coming in, because I've never seen so much info. And then everybody's got the competitive piece. So I feel like you have the technology, and then it's the 24/7 cable, but it's the 24/7 competition, like pressures. And we even, everybody across the board even has dashboards, what everybody's doing. And so as my boss likes to say, and this is popular, but like control the controllables, but try to push out those data points and know when to just kind of go to that next right critical piece. But I even myself, even though I love ambiguity and all of this, I feel very mentally challenged these days at times.
And we've heard that a lot. And if I can be slightly provocative,
Of course.
you, my dear, are in the sort of 0.0001% of talent, right? You've run big businesses. You're deep in the heart of this. You love it. You've got a clear leadership framework that you operate to, and you're struggling. So what hope for the rest of us? What hope for people who are just perhaps, putting their toe in the water of AI? What guidance and can this stuff be taught?
Yeah, so I know when we were prepping, we talked about not everybody has to be a builder, but everybody has to be a user. And so I'm a builder and a user and a speaker. And also I can geek out on some of this stuff and hyperfixate. But what I find is at the end of the day, even with AI and all of this, it's important to have clarity on what success looks like and how we're measured. And so again, it goes back to we have these customer relationships that if there's a challenge, we have to fix it. We have to help them grow. And by doing that, we help them meet their commitments. And then remembering that AI is a tool and there's different levels of adoption. And so I see a lot of people like building and doing like what I'm doing. I think for the users, what I'm seeing is like, I'll give you an example on my team. Now that we have access to build more capabilities and we're running these reviews, I have 2 people working on a new AI solution that every person on the team can click a button and do something that it would taken them maybe 1 to 2 hours to do. So instead of everybody building their own report, these days it's all about scale. And now we're like, oh, has someone else done this, right? So the beauty of AI is of how we're using it is it is that one-to-many. And so, but even with having all these different agents and all these different things, it still goes back to the advice of what's the critical path. If there's a tool to help you or an AI tool or something to help you get there, that's great. But I don't think everybody needs to do what myself and some of the other builders are doing. And I'm also seeing companies have more, there's more AI being baked into like enterprise systems. So say SAP or Workday or ServiceNow or whatever, right? And so the person, yes, they'll have to use it in their workflow, but the whole idea is to simplify and have less context switching. So, you know, like before we had these reports and then all of a sudden all these agents came along and I'm like, oh my gosh, which agent do I use, right? And so now we've simplified that and flipped that around. But I think that focusing on what is your role as the user, what is expected of you for the outcome, and then like the extra is just kind of the learning about it is the icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the kind of the real skill or what we're circling around there is this idea of discernment, you know, being able to smartly, sometimes creatively prioritize and self-prioritize what I need to do with everything the business needs of me and my team, with what I can do and what I can manage, and then do to some level of, you know, ability or some level of clarity or consistency. And that's, I suppose, where it becomes an interesting tension when we're wanting to scale things and we're wanting to move fast and we're wanting to do that effectively and I suppose cheaply or profitably. There's a sort of a speed needed in order to do that. And AI can certainly help us to accelerate things and to make things faster. I do it all the time. You know, things that I use with Claude and my other LLMs, you know, it takes me less than an hour on something that might have taken me 2 weeks, you know, all the time. So those stories are there, and that all, I think that's proven. At the same time, what I don't think is proven is whether speed is always better. And I suppose that is where the discernment comes in, where you're going to need someone, and I suppose ultimately a culture of people, to be able to go, you know what, let's take our time on this one. Let's think it through. Let's maybe meet again next week, see how we go, and then make a decision, for example, especially on something that might have multiple stakeholders or there's sensitivity in terms of the information being worked on. How do you think we can kind of optimize, not just for speed, but for discernment in a kind of a culture that gets things done, but also gets the right things done where the necessary amounts of care and attention is needed? Because when we're thinking fast, we're not always thinking of care and attention.
Yes, yes. So I would say the biggest benefit that we've seen more recently with AI beyond transcribing meeting notes or, you know, helping you with your email is lowering the administrative burden so you can spend more time on the value conversation. And so I'll give you an example of something my team real quick that is doing right now. So we have these programs called customer success delivery reviews. And basically it's going over customer success, different elements of the contract. And, we have a kind of an automated process, but everybody kind of has their own flavor of how they do things, but the business is changing. So a lot of times what we do is I'm going to have 2 or 3 people get examples from the whole team. And we want to move from more reporting to a value conversation. And so instead of telling everyone to do that, I'm going to have a few people revamp that and get buy-in from the team. And we're going to have and say, okay, 80% of this, and we're going to automate it. But then that way, every person, instead of spending time trying to figure that out and are you landing that, can really focus on thinking about what is that value conversation? What do I want to say to the customer, and take that administrative load off, right? Now, yes, there are times too that there's times I've tried to use AI to write things and I'm like, nope, this just needs to be my own voice. Or you need to slow down and take time to have a conversation. So I think one of the hardest things is, and I even see this too, is when you have a new report or a new process and you try to roll it out too fast and you're like, here's this agent, here's this tool, you can do X, Y, Z. Again, that's where it gets the frenzy. Oh, you can do this and this and this and use it. And you have this customer meeting. Oh, look, you can use it in 3 days at this customer meeting. There's not time to kind of step back and be like, what am I really using this for? What's the purpose of this? And then I find too, all these tech companies give you a lot of information. That discernment, there's a lot of, I hate to admit it, there's a lot of emails that come in that I never read. We get a lot of information, right? And so what I would suggest for people with AI, and yes, you have access to this, is to still remember the human side. What am I really trying to do with this customer, and how does AI support this? So if we're doing pipeline management, or we're generating reports, or we're doing things that everybody, I call it the laundry, there's stuff you have to do to look good or meet your needs, but it's very administrative. AI is good for those things. But when someone is upset or they want to grow, or you're trying to really move the needle or listen, I do think it's important to try to take out as much technology. There are a lot of times it's like, you know what, we're not even going to have a deck. We're going to have an agenda, and we're just going to have a conversation.
You sort of alluded to conversations where trust is really key, Carol. And I think the conversations Alex and I are having is that companies are scaling their AI strategies sometimes a lot quicker than they're scaling their trust in the organization. And, there's a lot of talk I don't want to have this conversation on the call today, but there's a lot of talk around, job displacement, job elimination. And there's a sort of a salve, which is, but new jobs are going to be created. The question I want to ask you is early career professionals. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the admin tasks that you're referring to there, the laundry, if you like, previously was the early career, was the first job that you cut your teeth on, you got the reps, you got feedback, and it was sort of certainly not mission critical, but it allowed our younger colleagues to step into the workforce and get some work experience and skills. Yeah. With that type of job increasingly done by AI, how do you see, or how do you think we avoid the problem of what I think of as hollowing out of the mid-career, because you haven't built the base, you haven't built the foundation? What are you thinking about in that regard?
Yeah, I think about that also because I do have 3 young adult daughters, and even though they're employed or in college, this is on my mind, related to them. And then also thinking about, you're right, like we still have to have that entry level, like when I was in Deloitte and, you know, the entry level, they came in and they build the PowerPoint decks and things like that.
Yeah.
As good as AI is on some things, there's still an element of human touch or design where it's really still not good enough to tell the story or to really make sure that it meets the requirements. So, and I think there's some backing off of it hollowing out. You know, there might be layoffs, but you can't say because AI is automating it all. And I always question that because I'm like, well, we're one of the most advanced users of and creators of AI. And I'm not saying my team couldn't be impacted, but given the contracts we have, I think what it is like, oh, you can just do more work. It's not that your work's going away, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess to get to the point here is I think there's a level of, I think there's two things. One is a level of AI fluency that everyone needs to know that's going to be in the workplace. And so whether it's in technology or whether it's at a consulting company or insurance or banking, first of all, I always say, and this is what I did in my career, is whatever industry you're going in, separate from AI, you need to understand that industry, how they grow, how they make money, how you progress. I mean, even early on, and even coming to Microsoft, I was like, give me copies of these contracts, and I'm, you know, learning that. So there's still the need to have that industry expertise. I still don't think that's really emphasized enough of whatever markets you're going in. Second is, how is AI disrupting that industry? And then can you find a play where you're like, okay, let's say you're going into the legal industry. Well, Claude just, you know, released a whole, you know, white paper and capabilities of Claude for the legal industry, Claude for financial industry, or like say you're looking at banking, like there's AI in that. So what I would suggest for early career people to do is, you know, use AI or do your own research. I mean, even when you go into Google, you're still using AI now, and really understand, pick an industry. How is AI disrupting that industry? What could you learn about it? Could you learn some skills around it? But I think just the days of knowing the basics of using ChatGPT, like learning like a little bit about skills, a little bit about co-work, like you can teach her, and I use AI to teach myself all the time, and then really look at an industry and say like, what can I learn about it? The other thing too is look at the job openings for that industry. So maybe pick, you know, a small, medium, and large company, then go in and look at what are they putting in their job descriptions now? What are they expecting? And then candidly, they can take that, put it in Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot, which actually uses Claude or ChatGPT, and just say, teach me the skills that I need to be able to do this job. So that's probably a whole nother conversation, but I hope that tracked. I mean, it's you know, several different things, but just know the industry, know the disruption, and set yourself apart by learning some industry specific skills for the place you want to go.
I suppose it's great advice. It's just that kind of advice, in order to actually do that, could take someone 10 years or 20 years, you know, to do that. You know, you pick up the industry skills, do the research, have a sense of what you're after. That kind of requires them.
I don't think so. I'm not saying you're going to get all the skills. I'm saying if your early career, like for example, if someone was interviewing for customer success on my team out of school, and they were like, hey, I understand this is what Microsoft is doing with AI. I understand like customer, you know, we have published use cases on how we're using AI in customer success. I don't expect them to have all that experience if we're talking early career. It's just specific enough industry knowledge and understanding that they're ahead. And I'll give you another quick example. So my youngest daughter is going to go to law school. It's a summer before her senior year of college. And normally you don't get internships until you're in law school, but she was able to get an internship with a small law firm and that specializes in AI liability and automation. And her job for the summer is tracking AI legislation and going on the Hill and going to hearings at Congress to learn about what's going on with AI. Given that her industry is being completely disrupted, like for her, she is doing something specific. So that's something somebody could do. So sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, but I just think that for early career, it's not about getting all the skills as much as it is. I would be very impressed if somebody came in and could tell me what was going on in the industry and AI and the companies and things like that. That shows me they have a growth mindset and that they're really serious about that. But I'm also open to being challenged on that too.
No, the reason I'm saying that is because you got me thinking, and in a way, the example you just said now with a young person going to law school, could it be argued that in some types of professions and specifically some types of training for professions as well, for example, the usual university path that young people might go to, or to learn a trade, or to go to law school, to go to medical school, there are many prominent voices online nowadays saying that don't even bother doing that. Rather set yourself up with a Claude subscription and create your own thing, or rather create an app that helps legal professionals use AI, and you'll make a killing there much more than you might ever, going to law school and becoming a trial lawyer, just for example. So it's interesting to see not just the conversation out there, but also how the changing nature of skills and acquiring them, and what we thought for the last 1,000 years has been the way to do it. But the kind of the social contract: go to school, do a good job, get a job, everything else, that's kind of changing in a big way. So it's just interesting to see now we're equating kind of almost, how far can I get by using AI and being able to build something, maybe becoming an entrepreneur, maybe by doing a whole lot of other things, rather than the established and more traditional things that perhaps don't look as certain in terms of what an employer might need as they did before.
Yeah, so I have lots of thoughts. I will try not to take up the rest of the time on this. So first of all, creating an app and becoming a millionaire, or, or maybe not even a millionaire, but making a living off of that, or being an entrepreneur in the tech industry right now, without some experience is very difficult because, and I'm just going to say it, the Microsofts and the Claudes and the OpenAIs can easily integrate that capability, or someone bigger, and disrupt that. So unless, I just feel like it's very narrow opportunity to build an app for the legal industry. You already have, and I'm not saying don't do that, but that's kind of like the kids that think because they played high school sports, they're going to be in the NBA. So, right. And so I'm not saying it's not a path. I'm just saying it's not as easy as it looks. That being said, now I do think those that are making it, like either you do that or you go to like startup businesses that have a good foothold. I think that's good. However, here's what I would like to challenge, and it makes me cringe when people say, you don't need college, you can do this online. I'd like to go back to that liberal arts conversation. So when you look at, the female founder of Anthropic, she has a liberal arts degree. Claude values hiring liberal arts majors. And also, I don't know about you guys, I love 18 and 19 years olds, but I have a hard time seeing them, with their frontal lobes ready to take on, jobs and go down this path. You might have a little bit of that, but when you're talking about some of these higher income areas, unless you're in one of these highly paid trade areas, I do think there's value. Again, coming back to AI, where I'm at right now, I now have an agentic system that has all of my data for everything I do in one place. Now what I'm trying to do is just ask better questions. So even if you're building an app, or even if you're building a website using Lovable or Codex or whatever, like if you can't communicate, if you can't take an idea, and yes, you can code it, but you still have to come up with the idea, the requirements. I mean, the biggest gap on that is taking your idea, getting the requirements, and now we're using natural language, right? And so you're talking about being independent and doing that. And I'm concerned that there's not enough focus on that critical, we talk about critical thinking and those things. How do you learn those things if you're just going straight from high school and taking coding classes and then trying to use natural language to, and then another big issue, and I left Silicon Valley before I could do this, is one of the things that I was asked is to go in and coach engineers on doing these executive briefings because they're good at technical stuff, but maybe the communication is not there. So that's kind of a few thoughts that I have, kind of painting a picture around. I think that a lot of the value of university is the relationships, the communication skills, the critical thinking, being put under pressure to produce. So now, I'm under pressure to deliver. I've been put under pressure in school to kind of do those things. So, however, I do think college ought to be 3 years and not 4, but that's another conversation. At least in the US,
So, as you know, Carol, in our sort of culture operating system, we have sort of multiple layers that we encourage leaders to intentionally design and focus on. We've talked a little bit about inner OS today, sort of the mental model that we need to not just survive, but thrive, given the flood of information that we have coming towards us, this need for discernment, decision-making, prioritization. That can feel pretty overwhelming, even for those of us who, are right in the thick of this. Let's for a moment talk about collaboration. So one of the things that you talked about as we prepared for this call was that you're seeing a little bit of a shift because much of what you're doing now hasn't been done before. You're seeing a level of collaboration, reaching out. You talked about the encouragement that you're giving people to ask questions, reach out, escalate, and so on. Do you think that is in part because roles are being removed? It's this unique moment in time where there's all of this stuff that we don't know? Or is it that you're seeing a fundamental, intentionally designed shift that is prompting greater collaboration across lines? I mean, Microsoft obviously has a long and documented history of growth mindset and the importance of reaching across. But do you think it's different now than, let's say, a couple of years back?
Yeah, I just think the complexity of work and the pace of work is just requiring a level of collaboration where collaboration is necessary versus nice to have. Because, we hear the terms do more with less, and yes, we have AI, so we think we can do more with less. But I feel like for the first time, because, well, let me back up and say this. Companies are providing less and less and less resources, right? Like a lot of these companies like that I'm in are flat. You might get a head count or 2 here, but the expectations are higher. And so one, you're all in it together. So there's a level of empathy. I won't say complaining, but it's like, when you're going through a challenging growth environment, you're all going through it together. I do think, though, everything is moving so quickly. It's kind of like I said, even in my own team, and I'm seeing people splitting things up. It's almost like the group project when you were in middle school, where you're like, okay, you take this chapter and you take this topic and you work on it and bring it together. I think those skills are required. I'm also just seeing a and I love this so much, is why build it if someone else has done it before versus you don't get credit anymore for building these big grand, oh, look at this deck that I built, or, I won't say where, and it wasn't Microsoft, but I worked at a place where somebody would have a PowerPoint and you would ask for a copy and they send it to you as a PDF. And I'm like, you don't own this, the company owns it, but they're like, oh, but I want to be the one that gets credit for it. I would say the cultural shift is focused on the outcomes that you drive, not the work products that you create to drive it, especially now, because like somebody builds a PowerPoint, it's like, oh yeah, you probably got, Claude or
yes, exactly,
Copilot to build
a
it.
little agentic help with that.
But I actually like the pivot away from what I would say more performative culture. Look at the pretty deck that I did, look at the pretty report that I did, or look at the effort. And not that effort doesn't matter, but now we are shifting and rewarding to, oh, a person built this, you saved this much time by reuse, and now you can do more. And so I'm really interested in others in this space are that growth mindset. And again, growth isn't just learning more, it's also being coachable. Is if I would rather see somebody go find 20 different things other people have built and apply them than one person trying to build something just to make themselves, oh, look what I know. But I don't even think that's on people's minds anymore. I think that performative work product culture versus outcome has changed quite a bit. So does that resonate? And now AI can build a lot of it. So now a lot of people are going to think like, well, you didn't build that anyway. So
yeah. Yes, it does. And I would say there's lots and lots of organizations out there that do not have this mindset of borrowed take from others, that are still highly political, that do not have, because I think one of the things that I'm listening carefully to is that it feels like there's a high degree of trust within your team, across departments, so that someone isn't going to do the big reveal and say, oh, look at me, and get the promotion. And so I wonder, I posit that some of the groundwork that's been put in place at your organization currently over many years is now enabling you to deliver on some of those, that cultural shift that you're talking about.
And I will say, I know things are changing in other companies because I'm still in contact. We jokingly say, we all do the same thing. We just have different business cards, and then you kind of, people go to different companies, But one of the things I've loved about Microsoft, it's not just the growth mindset, but one of the things we're measured on is building on the work of others. And so Satya just wanted to get away from that, I built it, I'm not going to share it, I'm going to take credit for it. And so we have these 3 circles of impact. So it's the work you do, it's the work you help others do, and then it's building on the work of others. And so I think trust by design, and it doesn't even have to be all of that, but think about what I would be curious is these companies that are highly political, that don't encourage the sharing, how are they growing in the market? Because when you start getting leverage, I would rather it be like people, again, fast, not frenzied, trying to share what they've done so others can get leverage and go faster and be more market facing, outcome facing, competitive facing versus the process. So in summary, pivoting the culture from like performative building to leverage and scale and impact, because there's just too much work to do. I can't think of an industry that's not being disrupted by AI in some way.
Carol, where for you are the most would you say the most challenging areas at the moment? And I don't just mean in adoption of AI. I mean more around being able to sustain the kind of healthy culture that makes people want to stay, makes people want to show up as their best selves and do good work and embrace the ambiguity and to learn and to try new things and to be experimental. What would you say now? And you can choose whether you want to be specific on something that is
Sure.
alive for you right now in your
Sure.
environment, in your team, or maybe a broader sense. It's up to you. But
Yeah.
something that is still unresolved in your mind, or maybe there's an incentive or there's a behavior. You mentioned the performative piece that is still kind of maybe keeping you up a little bit at night, that you're still trying to sort of find a way to really get a broad sense of what it is and what might be driving it.
Yeah. Couple of things. One is, what is healthy human capacity with AI? Like, yes, people burn out. Yes, you can keep pushing them. Yes, people want to keep their jobs, right? And so I worry about, like, especially now, because we were in an employees market where they're throwing money and benefits and all this at people. Now we're pivoted. So a lot of people have thrown culture and diversity and, like, mental health out the window, for profit. And so because, I mean, Microsoft, as great as it is to work, has its own challenges, right? Of the investments it's having to make. And so I'm like, how much can we really do? And I think good leaders and good culture look at trade-offs. Okay, you want my team to manage more accounts that they have in the past, and you have these metrics, and you look at it, and you, like, we're constant, I call it relentless prioritization. I do this with my calendar. I do this with my team. I tell my team, you do not have to go to any meeting you're invited to that's not customer focused or compliant, right? Or like required is kind of a loose thing, right? So I've given them empowerment because we get invited to a lot of things. So I do worry about that. I also worry about the mental load of AI. And I think I shared this with you in the prep. I've started reading fiction books because I tend to be like a data nerd and like physically reading. I was in Edinburgh and went to this beautiful bookstore and bought like 6 fiction books where it's not on a device. I'm physically reading it because normally I'm listening on Audible or I'm reading on a Kindle or I'm I read and consume a lot of nonfiction. Nonfiction. And so, the other day, again, I have this new system. It's really great, but I was just feeling like really overwhelmed. And I'll do this too. Like, I'm speaking, I'm posting on LinkedIn, I'm doing all of this. And then I'm like, all right, I've had enough of that. And so I'll literally back up. I'm still doing my job, but that hyper growth learning, I'm finding myself and my team can't sustain that. And so that's why, too, I'll say with my team, you're going to have to be a user, but not everybody has to be a builder. You might have to be a prompter, but there are those that are building. That being said, another term, and I love this, is we're trying to take friction out of the system. If you're going to use AI and it's a tool, I'd rather them click on a button and it just pop up and them not worry about, like, oh, what model is this? Is this 5.5 or 4.8, right? Where it's kind of taking the friction out of the system. And then I also, candidly, and again, having conversations with my daughters and others I do worry about the impact that AI has on the planet, on the economy. I know there's different models being talked about financially. There's different impacts. I love that, again, I moved from Silicon Valley to, London and worked with the EU quite a bit. I love that there are more boundaries to say, hey, we want to be thoughtful of our resources. And so, and I've started thinking more about, not that I can't use it, but okay, kind of like using too much water or whatever. It's like, do I really need to use AI for that. Just because you could doesn't mean you should. So that's several things that I guess I'm thinking about.
So I'm
Yeah.
hearing human capacity, personal mental load, making sure that we're being really intentional about taking friction out of the system to presumably create more capacity, and then the sustainability angle, so the impact on the environment, and also I think the economic model is also a little bit suspect. Sorry, Alex, you were going to bring us to a close, I think, here soon.
I was going to say, yeah, it's really refreshing to hear some of these kind of concerns and some of the questions, the open questions that you have, because not only does that double up, I think, in everybody's minds as well. Nothing you said there is unreasonable. I think everyone shares those as well, but also from a point of some influence internally within a large organization like Microsoft, and your experience and your impressive career so far, to know that those are the kinds of things you're also worried about, that you're thinking about, the fact that you've got young daughters who are busy building the early stages of their life as well. There's something reassuring in hearing that, but also something that I think shows that we've got a long way to go in the conversation, in the kind of the continuing roadmap of not just AI, but really who we are as a society, and the kinds of businesses and organizations and the kinds of cultures that we know we want to proliferate for the goodness of humanity, I think, hopefully.
Yeah.
and how that should still hopefully be in the crosshairs of what everyone is aiming for, and that our incentives, when we think about it, are really aligned, because our values are still aligned. We still want the best things for us. And so it's just good to have that as a reminder all the time, to not have that too far away in the conversation, that, hey, we all want the same things, we're all on the same side, and that really we need to operate from that as a starting point, so that we can navigate these tensions, because we're talking about embracing ambiguity, but then we're talking about setting up people with different skills in the beginning of their lives. We're talking about work harder, but then we're also saying, hey, use your discretion. Maybe you don't need to use AI all the time. So the incentives and the behaviors are reflective of the kind of conversation and the kind of maturity, if you like, in what we're seeing, that is still really early. That's still really much in its sort of infancy. And so there's a long way to go. I think that's encouraging rather than something that's difficult or dangerous. And it's just good to hear that we're sharing a lot of the same values and sharing a lot of the same questions. Yeah. So thank you.
I really appreciate that summary. And part of the reason I was excited to talk to both of you is I do care about culture, right? And I think the idea of culture and caring and kindness and understanding where people are and the impacts of things and being a good leader. And, I know early career, it's kind of hard to assess culture, but I think, companies should be building that culture of, yes, we work hard, but we support you, or, this growth mindset, but like there are these trade-offs, and so I really appreciate that. And I do think too, like, I have thought through, okay, what job could I have that's not AI? Like, I like what I do, and I like my main thing. I love leading teams. I love working with customers. I love helping people be successful. But I'm like, every different industry, whether it's education or healthcare or all these different ones, are everyone's being disrupted. And so I think what you guys are doing is great, of thinking about culture organizationally, but also individually. I think learning how to manage ourselves and not feeling frenzy, overwhelmed, experimenting, kind of the two-way doors, getting advice, asking good questions. I think sometimes I get concerned about younger generations not feeling comfortable asking courageous questions or communication, because I really feel like that success is going to be like one of my daughters trying to get an internship. I was like, why don't you reach out on LinkedIn, to a stranger, of somebody you've never known, you've never had to do that before. And that's how she got 2 offers and the job she has today in New York City, right? So like this idea of culture, and change of managing yourself through ambiguous situations, communication, understanding that regulation, like you said, that internal operating system. I think if we learn how to manage that, then it will help us kind of navigate through these other things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And somewhere less reliance on the institutions that have perhaps
yes.
traditionally provided some coverage for that.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, you're a very busy lady. I know we probably need to let you get off to your next call. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. As Alex said, I think just hearing insights, some of the foundational work that you've seen happen at your organization, as well as some of the evolving things that you're learning and understanding, have been incredibly valuable. I know our listeners will greatly benefit from that. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And keep up the great work on focusing on people and culture, because that's certainly what matters most. So thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right.